Okay, we have another question from Drew.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. My question relates to the unemployment rate and a possible solution. And Congressman, you've spoken about taking an unpopular position, and this might be one. Given the state of our economy, the high unemployment rate, and particularly the high teen unemployment rate, don't you think it's time to reevaluate having government set a minimum wage, and instead let employers consider hiring people at a rate they're willing to work for?
Well, it's always been a quandary, having what's called a minimum wage, especially a national minimum wage. I think the states, when was it, $5.15? Some states rose it depending on their economy. Some states didn't have it. So for the national government to set a national minimum wage is probably not working well, especially for younger, unskilled workers. The problem with a minimum wage is, can you have minimum qualifications, minimum work, minimum productions? It comes down to, there are some people, when you're paying somebody $7 an hour, in this state $8.52 an hour, and then on top of it you pay all the L&I costs and all the other costs, it comes down to a minimum wage today for a worker. It's about $15 an hour after you pay all the other requirements. And if you talk to a business leader, small business leader, says, I can't get $15 worth of production out of this worker, so I will not hire the people. Maybe we need a lower minimum wage for students, or maybe we need a minimum wage for those workers identified as long-term unemployed, who may be young and unskilled, for maybe a starter wage. But it comes down to, we're talking about getting more government bureaucracy and involvement in government. And so I think what we've had by raising the minimum wage rate during the good years it worked, but today I talked to business, they said, we could hire some people if we could find a good worker who's going to give us $15 worth of production. And that's what it comes down to. If they can't, then they don't hire them. So, it's another place where the government has gotten involved and seeing the day-to-day how businesses run. They interfere with the marketplace by setting an artificial standard. And if we're going to have to have a minimum wage, then we need to have some adjustments for certain workers in certain states. Thank you.
Just to answer the question clearly, I do support a minimum wage. I actually agree with some of what Dick said about how you need to figure out what that minimum wage should be, and it may be different for different types of workers. But just to directly answer the question as it was put to me, I do think a minimum wage is necessary to make sure that lower wage workers have some minimum contribution, get some minimum thing back from their contribution. I just can't support eliminating a minimum wage. It would certainly make things easier on businesses, but you've got that delicate balance. You also have to make sure that workers have enough money. It's sort of the Henry Ford principle that, when he raised the wages of his workers, he said, he can't afford to have people making his cars who can't afford to buy them. He wasn't so much a philanthropist. He was mindful of the fact that you've got to have consumers out there to buy the products. Get rid of a minimum wage, I think you would create problems. So, to be honest with you, I can't support eliminating the minimum wage.
Well, God bless Henry Ford. He was his minimum wage was $5 per day, which was way over the standard back then. But again, that wasn't a minimum wage. He did it basically on to get good workers to hire the best, and he was right. But he also got good production out of them. And I talked to my grandfather used to work at the Ford place for a long time there before the Depression. Then he got laid off, but then he hauled coal and ice and did lots of other things at $1 a day. But it comes down to, I can't see the country getting away from a minimum wage, but if we're going to continue to ratchet on up at the federal level, then it's going to be impacting lots of states and our ability to compete. The other part of the wage factor that we at the government need to watch out for is those other costs that get continually piled onto businesses. You hire a worker, you pay him $1, and then you end up paying him another $1 in wages and benefits and other requirements that are sometimes put on there by government. Every time, there's no such thing as a free lunch out there. You put it onto government, onto a business, they have to pass it on to the consumer or they go out of business.
this will be the last question amongst these two. And then we do have another congressional candidate that is here that I will introduce after this question. Okay, over the next couple of months, most employers will review, this is healthcare, their employment benefit package. At that time, employers must decide to renew or go in another direction, specifically as it relates to the employer healthcare insurance. To comply with the provision of the new healthcare reform laws, many employers are seeing dramatic increases in premiums, with the penalties for not providing health insurance being less expensive than the increased cost. Why wouldn't a small business owner drop health insurance coverage, pay the penalty, force their employees into the government-sponsored exchanges?
Well, there's several things about that. I mean, first of all, employers provide health care for the most part for the same reason that Dick was talking, that they provide wages, because they know it's necessary to get good workers. So I don't think you would see that equation change that much. And if we have a situation where people who are dropped from health care, which happens with great frequency, at least they would have someplace else to go to buy private health insurance going forward. They would have the exchange. There are a lot of employers right now that are already dropping workers from health care or moving down the health care benefits that are available. Why? Not because they're mean, because health care inflation is out of control and has been for years. And my biggest argument on health care, make two quick things. Number one, if you don't get everybody covered, it is almost impossible to control the costs. As long as you have 30 to 50 million people outside the system, those people don't pay anything into the healthcare system, but they get a lot back. And who pays for the healthcare that they receive? Any business, any individual who is insured. Go down to Good Sam and ask them how they work their books, the number of patients that they have to take who are not insured. How do they make that work? They treat them. We're a civil society. We don't turn away people. They charge everybody else a lot more. And it makes it very, very difficult to run that business. We have got to get everybody covered if we're going to get costs under control and have a sensible healthcare system. Second thing, we're going to keep wrestling with healthcare policy. We're going to make changes. Already there's a few changes that occur to me that need to be made. But this problem existed for a long, long time. I now hear people saying, oh, there's healthcare inflation, it must be the fault of the new law. Well, whose fault was it last year? Whose fault was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? As healthcare has gone up 10, 15, 20, 35, 40%. That was all driven by an unbelievably inefficient system that had too many people outside of it. And again, I've been working on healthcare policy for a long time, and the one thing I know about it is this: it's a heck of a lot easier to talk about than it is to actually have to vote on, to actually have to make a decision for how to deal with it. I had to do that, and I think I did it in an open and cooperative and transparent way, but we have got to make changes in what is our current healthcare system. I'm wide open to ideas for how we make changes in what the law is, but to simply let the status quo and the current system stand, I think would have been irresponsible.